Good day, students. I hope that you are well. My name is Precious Ngosi. We haven't formally met. You've probably seen me in the check-in meetings, but we haven't interacted yet. So this will be our first interaction. We're going to be doing standard costing together. It's going to run over 4 weeks. So after recess, we've got 3 more weeks, and this is our first week, so our first lecture. I think it's going to be really up to you to make it your own. Some people say standard costing is very challenging, but some people find it to be doable. It's just your attitude towards it. And this is actually a very important topic because your foundation is here. They're not going to teach you anything new when you get to CTA. So whatever notes that you make from this, make sure that you go into detail, that you're studying so that you can understand, not just so that you can pass a test. And then that will help you then, because next year you'll then use those notes and just use them to recap what we did. And then you can start with the application thereof, because next year the only thing that gets really complicated is the application, but nothing on the theory side changes. So if you're here, it means you've watched the introduction video. So that video is taken from another institution overseas, but I like just the way they summarize everything that we're going to be doing. We're going to be unpack it, and it's not going to be in 7 minutes like they did. We're going to be unpacking each and everything that they discussed today, but that is a general overview of what we're going to be dealing with. And the purpose of this lecture, therefore, is to give you an introduction more on a basis level, to tell you what we're going to be discussing, what you can expect. And then the 3 weeks that are left will then be delving more into the theory and making sure that we actually are now getting to the application thereof, which is the interesting part, really. So this is going to be just a short video, taking you through the slides and making sure that we understand what we're talking about when we talk about standard costing. And if you also look at the previous year's test papers from May, so from the assessment 2, the exam, assessment 3, 4, until the end of the year, there was a bit of standard costing that was tested here and there. So it is a very important topic, and please make it your own. Please send me your questions via email and make sure that you are following. So if you get to the end of recess and you haven't watched this video, you're going to actually fall behind, because then we're going to start with the practical. So if you're watching this and you know that your friend is not watching, please just give them a shout and tell them that they need to actually catch up before we get to lecture 2 and go forward. But anyway, without wasting any of your time, I'm going to start going through the slides and just giving you a background in terms of what we're going to be doing. So what are standards? So we use the word standard every day in our everyday lives. What do you mean when you say you've got standards as a girl, as a woman? What do you mean when you say the IFRS standard? So we use it in our everyday life, in the streets, at home, and even at school. So standards are really like a code, an ideal, a law, a measure, an expectation, the normal. So if I say this is my standard, it just means this is how I expect things to go. So this is my basis. This is where I start. This is the least that I expect of myself. I am, for example, an A student, and that is my standard. So I expect that in every test that I write, I'll get an A. So that is the standard that I'm going to be measured against in terms of my actual performance. So like I say here, standards are everywhere. And they are, simply put, a benchmark that we're going to be using to compare your performance to the actual. So you would like to perform at a certain level, which is your standard, your normal, or your expectation, if I use other terms. And then we compare that with your actual. When we compare with your actual, what we get, that difference that we get, we actually call a variance. And then we need to go investigate why we have that variance. So that's where that's what basically standard costing is. It's about looking at your standard, if you know what your standard is, comparing it to your actual, getting a difference, which you call a variance X, going and investigating that variance and say, why did this occur? who is responsible for this variance, and then going back and fixing either the standard or making sure that what happened in that case, which caused a variance, doesn't happen again. So it's basically used by your financial managers if we go into practice, because they're the ones that are more responsible to look at the operational costs and make sure they manage those. And in them managing that, they need to be able to make decisions. So we do standard costing so we can make decisions in terms of our product. But let me go on here before I go on and say things that are still coming on the slides. So the formal definition is that they are predetermined costs or target costs that you should be incurring under efficient operation conditions or basis. So that means that you predetermine that this is going to be my standard, this is going to be my norm, this is how I'm going to be operating. And then we use your actual to actually measure if you've been performing according to that. And we know that standard costing is important for decision making, because once you get the variance, you then manage by exception. You say, I have this variance, what does this tell me about my business? I can come with a discontinuation decision based on the variances that I'm getting. I can, for example, change suppliers because of the variances that I'm getting. So it helps us with our decision making. It is also used for performance. Because you are comparing two things, you can actually judge a certain division in terms of their performance, or a certain department. Let's say, for example, a procuring department where they had to buy material at a certain cost and they actually spend more than they should have. And when you have that discussions, you can say you are not performing up to standard based on how you are procuring the material that we need. So that is how the standard costing comes into enabling us to making decisions. So it's a start for us to be making important decisions there. And also, what you need to remember about standard costing is that it cannot be used by all companies. It can only be used by mostly manufacturing companies and some service organization where what they do is repetitive. That simply means for you to have a norm, you need to be doing the same thing over and over again. So if you are making shoes, you're in the business of making Nike shoes. So when you make the sneakers, you use the same kind of material, you use the same labor, and you get to your final product and then you sell it. But if, for example, you're making a customized product, like you're going to build a boat for the president. So the president is asking you to build a boat and they've got some specifications. This is how they want it to look. This is how it must operate, the efficiency that they want. Therefore, that means this thing is new to you. So every product that you make is new to you. So you cannot, in that case, use standard costing because you won't have a standard for that specific product. I'll make another example. If we speak of David Tlale and he's designing an outfit for Somizi. In him designing the outfit, it's a new outfit that he hasn't made before. So in that case, he cannot use standard costing because he needs to go find a certain kind of material for this. This is new, right? He needs to find a certain kind of design that he's going to work with. But if he's making his normal brand of jeans that he sells through retailers, he can use standard costing because he makes the same kind of jeans over and over again. So it's a repetitive process, meaning that it is easy for you to then establish what the standard is. How would you like to make this product? You have an output in your head, you know what should go into it, which is the input, and you are familiar with the process of getting to the output. And therefore you are able to establish your standard. So we've discussed this, but basically, if you can go back to the introduction video, we know that to establish a standard cost, there are two things involved. We have the price, P, and we've got the quantity. So basically that is what makes up your input. If I have material, it's about how much material I'm using, which is the quantity or the volume. And it's about the price that I paid to incur the price that I incurred to buy the material. So it's basically how much did I pay for this thing and how much of it am I using? So the quantity and the price, those are the two things that you're going to be worrying about. And those two components will always be there. Whether we're talking about labor, there's going to be a rate at which you pay, and there's going to be the efficiency thereof, meaning how long did they take? Were they quick to produce whatever it is, or to assemble whatever it is that they needed to assemble? So we've got then the volume and the price. So those two components will always be there. It can be called by different names, but it's still, in principle, we need to have a price and a volume. So we need to be aware of that. And on the next one, we're going to discuss how standards are formed. So this is not really something critical for you, but you need to understand that to be able to create a standard, we can either use past historical records, where we go and say, in the past, for me to make this pair of sneakers, this is what I used, this is how much material that I used, and the labor time that it took for me to get to the final product. Therefore, that will be my standard. It takes me an hour to assemble the sneaker. Therefore, that is my standard. If someone takes 2 hours, then I've got a variance, because I'm looking at my standard compared to the actual, and then I need to go investigate why did they spend more time than they were actually supposed to. So that is the whole theory behind this when we are using past historical records. Then you can, of course, always use engineering methods, where you employ someone, an engineer, to come and learn the processes in your factory, and then tell you, under efficient operating conditions, this is how long it should be taking you to assemble a sneaker. This is how much you should be spending in terms of your leather, or whichever other material that you use. This is how much it should be costing to get that material, because they've went and investigated with different suppliers how much it can cost to buy this particular input that you'll be using. So that goes on to explain what past historical records means, which I've just explained. You can obviously look at the advantages and disadvantages, where the disadvantages that you are not learning from your past mistakes. You are using the past as your benchmark, as a standard for you. You are not saying, in the past, this is what I do, how can I improve? Because the past is not necessarily your most efficient operating conditions. So that is one of the disadvantages, but it is still usable, because you look at how you were performing in the past based on your history. So they don't do it just over one period. They can do it over 5 years, where they are monitoring how you are performing. And after that, they then take an average and say, okay, on average, this is how much you should be making in this given time. So then they look at the prices and the quantities that you should be getting. And then we look at engineering studies, which I've explained, where you involve someone from outside to help you with this. So then also, how can we use a standard costing system? Like I said, we report variances, where we look at the actual cost and we compare it to a variance. That is basically what we're going to be doing. It is what you're going to be doing when you are doing a mix and yield. It is what you're doing when you are doing a simple variance. So it changes, but you're basically doing the same thing, just under different conditions and using different kinds of inputs. But you will get into that definitely. It also says here, what does a standard costing system involve? So you first need to set your standards so that you have a benchmark. And then you need to compare your benchmark to your actual, and then you analyze the variances so that you can make decisions. And you'll see there, like I said, it is basically about taking the actual costs and comparing them to the standard cost and looking at the variances and then investigating those variances. That is, this slide here is a summary of what you're going to be doing for all the different inputs that you're going to be dealing with. And then we discussed this as well, the purposes of standard costing. I mean, we need to make decisions from it. That is the most important reason for us to be doing standard costing, so that it can enable us to make decisions. And that is what it is used mostly for in practice. If you happen to work as a financial manager, you will see that you mostly, someone actually, or a system does the whole standard costing variances, and they bring it to you so that you can look at it and then be able to make decisions from that. But at this point in your studies, you are trying to understand how the standard costs are formed, and then you are trying to understand, how do I then get to these variances? And then you can get to a point where you can make decisions. It also helps us with our budgets. We can use our standards in our budget. Remember, in the introduction video, they also discussed what the difference is between a budget and a standard. So a standard is on a per unit basis. So it's saying, for one unit that I'm producing, or for a sneaker, what is it that was the input and what output did I get? When we speak of a budget, we are saying you made 100,000 of these things. So how much did you spend to make 100,000 of these things? So a budget is more on a total basis, while a standard cost is on a per unit basis. So like we said, there's two components in a variance. It would be the price that you paid and the quantity that you use. We may use different terms for these. We can use volume, we can use rate, we can speak of efficiency, but at the end of the day, we are really just talking about the two components that make up your cost, which is your price and your quantity. So now we're going into what is a price variance. But that is basically the difference between the price that you paid and the price that you should have paid. So in standard costing, you'll see we use the word should a lot. And that simply means, what was the standard? What were you supposed to do? That's why we say should have paid and then paid. So if I do, based on my past historical records, I said that my standard is that I purchase from a certain supplier who charges me for leather to make shoes. They charge me 100 Rand per meter or something like that. When I now go and look at my standard and I paid 120 rands for a meter, then that 20 rands, which is a variance, is the thing that I want to investigate to say, why did I pay more? Did I use the same supplier? Has the supplier increased their prices? Or did I use a different supplier? Or did I go procure material that is more expensive and maybe more durable? These are the kind of debates that you're going to be having when you're looking at your variances. And then the other one is the quantity. Obviously, this is how much of a thing you have used. If, for example, the laborers take an hour instead of 30 minutes to assemble a sneaker, that is the 30 minutes difference is what we want to investigate. If they take 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes, we want to investigate the 10-minute difference. Why did you take less time than you should? And that's what basically we're going to be involved in for the next 4 weeks. We're going to be looking at these variances and investigating why did we have the variances. Okay, so now I'm highlighting you. So this is not something that you go and you cram and you say, if I've got a material price variance that is favorable, it means that the efficiency department was, the purchasing department was efficient. This depends on a case to case. It's going to be given in the scenario, and you have to pick up on your own what the possible reason for a variance is. So this list is not exhaustive in any way, and I am just putting it here so that you can get a better understanding of what I mean when I talk of the possible reasons for variances. So these are not all the reasons. There could be more, but that obviously we are led by the scenario in front of us. Anyway, we need to also don't forget that a variance can be good and bad, right? So you can get a variance where you've saved money, or you can get a variance where you actually spent more than you should have. So when the variance is good, where you saved money, we say the variance is favorable. And when the variance is bad, where you used more money than you should have, or you spend more time than you should have, we say the variance is adverse or unfavorable. So you always need to indicate the direction of the variance so that I can pick up that you actually understand what you're talking about. Don't just say the variance is 10,000. 10,000 favorable or unfavorable. I'm still not sure if you understand really what you're talking about. So you always need to make sure that that is there. Yeah, so here it could be a change in market conditions. By that, I mean that in the market, the price for leather could have gone up, so a general price increase, or it could have gone down. Maybe it's driven by demand, and therefore the price went down to encourage demand. So those are the kind of reasons that you may have. You could have purchased inferior material where you have your normal supplier, which you normally use, and now you went and bought from another supplier in China, more for argument's sake, and that supplier is cheaper. And because the supplier is cheaper, it may happen that the material is of an inferior quality. So these are the kind of things that we then need to investigate, where the company says, can we continue using the supplier? Or maybe the supplier has durable material and they're just cheaper, and we've been purchasing from a supplier that is more expensive. Then we can now use a new supplier. This is where we change our standards and we say, I have been using this supplier, but I found another supplier who is cheaper. So now I'm going to go with the cheaper supplier because they give me the same quality of material. So that's where the business decision sort of comes in. And I want you to be always aware that there could be a lot of reasons for these variances. Here I've just listed 3 or 4 of them, but there could be a lot. You could be purchasing in bulk, like I say here. If you purchase in bulk and you get a discount, then that means you'll have a favorable price variance because you paid less for the same number of goods. If you look at a rate variance, it's still like a price variance. Like I said, they differ based on the input that we're referring to. But if I look at a wage rate variance, I am saying, okay, it could be due to a strike. You know, in South Africa, we experience a lot of these where unions go and negotiate for a raise. And you could possibly not have budgeted for it and it's not included in your standards. But now when you actually pay, you pay at a higher rate because there was negotiations with the unions. So that would be the reason you'd have an unfavorable price variance. Or there could be over time. So now you are paying more. So you are paying more for the same thing. That means maybe the laborers were not efficient. So they spend more time on the same thing. So now the rate that they're going to get paid is a bit higher because, I mean, they were working on a Saturday and you get paid more if you work on a Saturday and as opposed to during the week. So those are the kind of reasons that we're looking at, which could give us possible variances. So a rate variance could also come from, for example, you've got a job that can be done by unskilled laborers, but the unskilled laborers are not available. So use skilled laborers to do the same job, but skilled laborers charge more because they've got certain qualification and there's a certain benchmark that you need to pay them. So then you'll get an unfavorable variance. Or it's the other way around. You usually use skilled laborers and now you're getting unskilled laborers and they're cheaper and you get a favorable variance. So really, these are not exhaustive. They're just an indication of what could possibly happen. When you speak of usage, the reasons for the usage, it could be, for example, I speak here of the material usage variance, where you handle material carelessly, where there was a lot of wastage, and that means you've been using more material for you to be able to give me the same output. So that would be an unfavorable variance. Or it could be that the material that you purchase is of inferior quality. Therefore, I need to add more of it to get to the same output. So instead of just taking one sheet of leather, I need to stack 2 sheets of leather together to be able to make this sneaker. And therefore, I'll have an unfavorable variance in terms of material usage, but a favorable variance in terms of price because you got it at a cheaper price. So you calculate these variances separately. You have a price variance and then have a material usage variance. So material price variance, material usage variance. In total, they still give you the variance. However, we separate it because we want to be able to make decisions. If I'm looking at the total, I am not sure what happened. I don't know what kind of decision I should be making from the information that I'm given. But if I know that we have a variance because the purchasing managers spend more than they should, then I know where to go. I know what kind of questions to ask, and I know what kind of decisions I can make based on the conversations that I'll be having. So if I work on a total basis, I am generalizing. I could be going and saying, guys, what happened, you spend more in material, and the purchasing manager says, no, I didn't. It's because they used more material, because that variance has two components in it. So that's why we always try and separate the variances. So yeah, I'll also go through that labor efficiency. Again, it could be the material. So the kind of material that you use could be taking longer or a short time for the laborers to put together and assemble to get to your desired output. It could be that you don't maintain your machinery well, and therefore you've got these stoppages, you need to start over, you're having a wastage. So all these things lead to your laborers taking more time to assemble a unit. And therefore, as a result of this, you end up saying, oh, they are inefficient. But that's why we go and we investigate the variance, and then we can make an informed decision, which is what all of this is about. So yeah, I think we've covered the introduction. Let's just look at the next steps. In the next steps, you are going to be looking at, first of all, you need to have read your textbook from page 450 to page 458. That is where the introduction is. So if you went through the first few slides, you should have also went through the introduction that is given in the textbook and watched the video that I've uploaded for you earlier in the week. And then we're going to do an example. So the example we're going to do on Blackboard, it is also going to be for maths. So look out for it when you come back from recess. It's going to be the first thing that you do. You're going to do the example, and then we're going to have a feedback class on it after recess, of course. So the dates for the activity will also be confirmed, but they all after recess. So take this breather, and then when you come back, we're going to look at the example and see really how long we've been. I was just trying to figure out something here, but yeah, so you can see what we've been doing. I can't stress how important that example is. You need to go through the example. It's going to make your foundation so strong that when we get to the tricky parts of standard costing, you will still be fine. So please make sure that you do go through the example. When the time comes, I'll definitely announce after recess, the first Monday after recess, when you need to do this. And then we'll probably have the feedback class on that Thursday. So just to give you a highlight, so I'm not going to go through these slides in detail because we're still going to discuss after the working example, but a highlight is that the notes from the supported baby example, that's the name of the example, are going to teach you how to flex, where you are saying, can I just use my budget as it is, or do I need to flex my budget to reflect the current units that I've used, so then I can compare that to the actual. But definitely this is something we're going to be discussing after you've done the example. I'm just giving you an overview here where we're going to say, okay, if I compare my budget to my actual, what variances do I get? Are those variances meaningful? Can I use them to make decisions? Remember, we're doing this so that we can make decisions. If I cannot do that, what do I need to do? I need to flex. And when I flex, I'm simply saying I want to be comparing apples with apples so that I can make an informed decision. And who do you then blame for variances? That's when we're going to look at how we expand the variances. So the slides basically explains what I just explained in terms of flexing and the new budget, which is the flexed budget, and then the actual, and then the difference is now more of a reasonable one so that we can be able to make a decision from it, and we can be able to go investigate further other than where there's a variance. But I mean, we did not compare apples with apples, so there are a lot of things there that are not right that hinder us from then using this information to be able to make decisions. Remember, this part we're still going to go through when you do the working example. I'm just giving you just a bit of a hint of what we're going to be doing after recess, which is the working example, and you have to go through it in detail. And okay, I speak with my hands a lot, but you'll be able to go through it in detail and come back and be able to understand this more. That's why we're going to go through it again after recess. So it explains now when you've got your differences, then you have to split them between material, labor, variable overheads. So basically what I want you to know as of now is that whatever input it takes you to make, for example, a cell phone, whatever input that is in here, that got to your final product. You need to calculate a variance for each thing. The plastic that you use, the glass that you use, the software that you used, the labor that you use, everything that got you to your desired output, you're going to be using, and then calculating variance for each of those things. So it's not always just material, labor, variable overheads. The material could be different types of material. There could be different types of labor. There could be fixed overheads as well, which we're going to discuss. So it's every single thing that goes into you making your final product. And obviously, you've got how you calculate a variance is basically the difference between what you paid and what you should have paid, or what you used and what you should have used. And we'll discuss after the working class example exactly how these then come about in terms of you getting a total variance. But this is just a slide to show you that this is what we're going to be doing after recess. And we've also got sales variances. So it's not just only your input costs. We also look at the sales and say, look at the sales department and saying, how much did you sell? How much were you supposed to sell? What price did you charge? What were you supposed to charge? So those are the other considerations that we look at. And then we also look at now your variances. And remember, this is now a refresher slide to say, remember your variance has a price and a quantity. So when I say calculate variances, I'm not going to say, I don't necessarily have to say calculate a price variance, calculate a quantity variance. I can just say calculate the variances. Then you know you need to show me what the price was and what the quantity was. You need to look at the actual and say, how does it differ from the standard? You know, and we need to look at the reasons, of course, for why those things happened. And then at the end of it all, we are going to be able to then do a recon where we say, this is my budgeted information. How do I then get to the actual using the variances? And again, this we're going to critically analyze after recess once you've done the working class example, which is followed by this slide. So yeah, I wanted to get to this final slide. I may have went through the last bit very quick, but that's because I'm going to repeat it in a collaborate session when we look at the working class example. So please remember that. But I need to give you an idea because you're going to do the example on your own first before we have the actual class. So this is just for you to remember or think about these things when the questions come on that working class example. So what I want to emphasize on this slide is that when we look at variances, there are certain people that are responsible for the variances. So there, you see it says responsible person, it goes to say sales manager, purchase manager, personnel manager, production manager. So because standard costing is a decision-making tool, this just goes to show that once I've got the standard and I'm investigating, and now I know the person responsible for this is the sales manager, I can go then have a very relevant conversation with the sales manager because I know that the variance was caused by them, and then I can make decisions out of that discussion. So that's why you cannot just calculate a variance, for example, for material in its totality, because there were two people involved there. There was one person who went out and bought the material, and then there's another person who actually used the material in the production process for, to get to the desired output. So these two people both contributed to the total variance. So if you want to know who deserves a bonus and who doesn't, you then have to break down the variance between a price variance. Like I said earlier, we split the variances and a quantity variance. And then for the price variance, you say, I will discuss this with the purchasing manager because they're responsible for getting the material. And for the quantity variance, I will discuss this with the production manager because they're the one who actually used more or less. And they can say it's because the material that I got is of an inferior quality. Then it goes back to the purchasing manager because they purchased inferior quality material, but still it is necessary to have the conversation with both of them so that when you make a decision, you make an informed decision, which is what standard costing is all about. I think I enjoy standard costing, so I really hope that we're going to enjoy it together and you are going to learn a lot and also have a lot of fun. So like I said, the steps that follow from now, you need to make sure that you go through your textbook, you listen to this, you look at the slides, and when we come back, we're doing one big example that you're going to first do on your own, and it's going to count for marks. And after that, we're doing a class where we're going back to that example and checking what are the things that we need to learn from this thing. Thereafter, we can continue and build on that strong foundation. I want us to really delve into that example because it builds a strong foundation for us to be able then to add onto that. We will add the mix and yield variances, we will add the fixed overhead variances, we'll add the variable overhead variances. So we'll keep adding to that, but that is the basis of it. So yeah, that's it from me. I hope the video was not too long. Yeah, I tried to check the time, but if it was too long, it's a learning curve for me. I will definitely look into making them shorter, but the next one will be a collaborate session, so they will be engaging more and will take all the time that is needed for me to be able to clarify all the questions that you may need. But anyways, please do send me an email if there's anything that you didn't understand, and send a WhatsApp, not personal, like on the group, guys. Just send a WhatsApp on the group. I'll see it and then oh, you can't send WhatsApps on the group, sorry. You need to send me an email. And then if it's something that I think everyone has missed, I'll definitely then send it again on WhatsApp and respond to it again. Please, let's do that. And yeah, have a good break, guys. Make sure that you are well rested. And when you come back, we can delve into this nice topic even more. Please make sure that you remember that you have an assignment. I've been getting a lot of queries, but the queries are related to group members. So I'm hoping that this is the last week where you are sorting out group members, and from next week, you're really, really working hard on the assignment. It's going to post your semester mark or your year mark, and it's a good learning curve. I mean, this is a real case. Nedbank actually took one of their clients, and now you're working with that. Obviously, for us to make it examinable, we had to change some things, but it's actually from Nedbank to you. So we didn't do any work on it. So really, I think it's a great learning experience for you guys. So please just make sure you do that and give it all your time. And yeah, I wish you all the best for your studies. Thank you, guys. Okay. Thank you. I will now be ending this. Good luck for your studies.